I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I once told a pack elder that his toupee looked like a dead squirrel. I once bet my entire quarterly bonus on a poker hand holding nothing but a pair of twos. But walking into the penthouse suite of the Grand Lunar Hotel, kicking open the bathroom door and asking the naked man standing under the spray if he was the complimentary dessert, that wasn't just a mistake. That was a tactical nuke to my own survival instinct. Most wolves would have dropped to their knees and bared their throats in submission upon seeing the Alpha King in his birthday suit. I didn't drop anything, except maybe my jaw, and I definitely didn't look away. Welcome back to Eliana's Romance Library. I am so excited to share this new story with you. It is absolute fire. But before we dive in, I want to do a quick roll call. We have the most amazing community from all over the world, so head down to the comments right now and let me know where you are listening from today. Drop your city or your flag. I want to see how global our pack really is. Now, grab a cold drink, because you are definitely going to need it. Chapter 1, The Wrong Door. If the hotel concierge hadn't given me that patronizing smirk when I asked for an extra pillow, none of this would have happened. I was tired, I was hungry, and I had just spent 6 hours on a plane next to a werewolf toddler who was teething on my armrest. My patience wasn't just thin, it was non-existent. So, when my keycard flashed red for the third time at the door of the penthouse suite, I didn't trudge back down to the lobby to sort it out like a sensible beta. I didn't call for help. Instead, I remembered the trick my brother taught me about older electronic locks, swiped the card diagonally while kicking the base of the door, and felt the mechanism click open with a satisfying thunk. Finally, I muttered, dragging my suitcase over the threshold. Victory is mine. The room was dark, the air thick with the scent of expensive cedarwood and something else, something heavy. Rain before a storm. Ozone. It smelled like power, but I was too exhausted to parse the nuances of the pheromones assaulting my nose. I just wanted a hot shower and a very cold drink. That's when I heard it. The hiss of water running in the master bath. My brows shot up. Housekeeping. At 10 o'clock at night? Hello? I called out, dropping my keys on the marble console table. No answer. The water kept running. Irritation flared hot and bright in my chest. I specifically requested a room that was empty, quiet, and devoid of hotel staff, pretending to clean while watching my pay-per-view. I marched across the plush carpet, my heels sinking in, and threw open the double doors to the bathroom. Look, I appreciate the dedication to hygiene, but I'd really like to use my... The words died in my throat. The room was a sauna, white marble sweating under the heat. And there, standing in the center of a glass-walled shower roughly the size of my first apartment, was a man. A very large, very naked man. He was facing away from me at first, giving me a prime view of a back muscled like a mountain range and scarred with the kind of marks you don't get from paper cuts. Water sluiced down his spine, tracing paths over tanned skin that looked harder than the stone beneath his feet. He must have heard the door slam, or maybe he just felt the sudden intrusion of my horrified silence because he turned slowly. It wasn't a maid. It wasn't a manager. It was Otis, the alpha of alphas, the king. I should have screamed. I should have covered my eyes. I should have backed out slowly, closed the door, changed my name, and moved to a different continent. Instead, my eyes did a slow, appreciative sweep. Broad shoulders, abs that looked like they could grate cheese, and, well, everything else was equally royal. He stared at me through the steam, water dripping from his dark hair into eyes that were rapidly shifting from human hazel to a predatory, glowing gold. He froze, his hand half raised to the glass wall, looking more confused than he'd probably ever been in his life. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, heavier than the steam. He looked dangerous. He looked lethal. He looked like he could snap me in half with a single command. My brain rebooted, frantically searching for a protocol to follow. Bow? Kneel? Apologize? My mouth, apparently deciding that today was a good day to die, chose none of those options. I leaned my shoulder against the doorframe, crossed my arms over my chest, and raised an eyebrow. Room service? I deadpanned. I don't recall ordering the specialty, but I'm certainly not sending it back to the kitchen. The shock on his face was worth the treason charge I was probably about to catch. The golden glow in his eyes flared brighter, burning away the confusion and replacing it with something darker. Something possessive. He didn't cover himself. He didn't yell. He reached out, his wet hand slapping against the shower tile, and shut off the water. The sudden silence was deafening. "You," he growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and straight into my bones, "are in the wrong room." Debatable, I shot back, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My key worked, therefore this is my room, which makes you the intruder. And frankly, for an intruder, you're very underdressed. Otis stepped out of the shower. He didn't reach for a towel. He walked straight toward me, water pooling on the floor with every step, closing the distance until the heat radiating off him hit me in a wave. He loomed over me, blocking out the light, smelling of rain and raw, terrifying dominance. He slammed his hand against the doorframe right next to my head, trapping me. "I'm not room service," he whispered, leaning down until his lips were inches from my ear. "But since you're here, you might as well be useful." Behind me, the heavy bathroom door clicked locked. Chapter 2. Predatory Instincts. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in a library. I was pressed against the doorframe, the cold wood biting into my shoulder blades while a wall of wet, naked alpha heat radiated inches from my face. Otis didn't touch me. Not yet. But he didn't have to. The air between us was so charged with static I could practically taste the ozone. And then it hit me. The scent. It wasn't just cedar and rain anymore. It was deeper, richer. It smelled like home. It smelled like the only thing that had ever mattered. My wolf, usually a dormant, sarcastic creature who preferred naps to conflict, woke up with a snap. She didn't just wake up. She threw herself against the inside of my ribs, howling, "Mine, mate, claim." Oh, hell no. "Useful?" I managed to squeak, my voice betraying me for a fraction of a second before I wrestled it back under control. I cleared my throat, forcing my eyes to stay locked on his face and absolutely nowhere else. "I'm a vice president of marketing, Your Highness. Unless you need a rebrand or a SWOT analysis of your shower routine, I'm afraid my utility is limited." Otis tilted his head. The water from his hair dripped onto my collarbone, sizzling like acid. His pupils were blown wide, black, swallowing the gold. He was scenting me. He was hunting. "Kneel," he commanded. It wasn't a request. It was the alpha voice, the supernatural tone that forces biology to override logic. It slammed into my knees, a physical weight demanding I drop to the floor and bare my neck. My knees buckled, but I didn't drop. I grabbed the door handle behind my back, using it to prop myself up, breathing through the crushing pressure of his will. Sweat broke out on my forehead. Most wolves would be flat on the tiles by now. But I had spent 10 years climbing the corporate ladder in a male-dominated pack. I had built up an immunity to testosterone-fueled orders. "Pass," I gritted out through clenched teeth. Otis blinked. The gold in his eyes flickered, the absolute certainty of his command shattering against my stubbornness. He looked genuinely baffled. "You refused." "I have bad knees," I lied, breathless. "And you have a boundary issue." I saw the shift in him. The confusion was giving way to fascination. He leaned in closer, his nose grazing the sensitive spot behind my ear, inhaling deeply. "You smell like defiance," he murmured, his voice rougher now, stripped of the command but heavy with desire. "And vanilla. It's a maddening combination." His hand came up to touch my face. I panicked. If he touched me, skin to skin, it was game over. The bond would snap into place, and I'd be picking out china patterns for the royal palace before I could say prenup. My hand shot out, grabbing the fluffy, monogrammed bath towel hanging on the rack to my left. With a desperate shove, I launched it at his face. "Cover up!" I yelled. "It's hard to negotiate a truce when I can see your royal scepter." Reflexes are a beautiful thing. An alpha catches what is thrown at him. Otis's hand snapped up to catch the towel before it hit his face, blinding him for exactly 1 second. That was all I needed. I twisted the lock, threw my weight against the door, and stumbled out into the bedroom. I didn't look back. I grabbed my purse, abandoning my suitcase, RIP to my favorite heels, and sprinted for the hallway. "Zola!" He knew my name. How the hell did he know my name? I didn't stop to ask. I hit the hallway running, my heels sinking into the deep carpet, making me feel like I was running through quicksand. I reached the elevator bank and mashed the call button like I was trying to punch a hole through it. Come on. Come on. The penthouse door down the hall slammed open. I dove into the open elevator carriage just as a roar ripped through the corridor, a sound so primal, so full of frustrated possession, that the elevator doors rattled in their tracks as they slid shut. Chapter 3. The Lobby Standoff. I need to check out, now. The receptionist, a young beta female with wide, terrified eyes, stared at me. I was a wreck. My blouse was disheveled, my hair was wild, and I was panting like I'd just run a marathon, which, emotionally speaking, I had. "Ma'am," she squeaked, typing furiously on her keyboard. "You checked in 10 minutes ago." "And it was a lovely 10 minutes, I said, drumming my fingers on the marble counter. 5 stars, great water pressure. But I've remembered a pressing engagement. In Antarctica. I can't." She paled, looking at her screen. "The system, it's locked." "Locked?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, locked?" "It says, by royal decree." She whispered the last part, looking around the lobby as if saying the words might summon a lightning bolt. "Your account is frozen, Ms. Zola. Security has been alerted to keep your luggage in the suite." "My luggage?" I scoffed, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "Keep the luggage. Keep the bras. I'll buy new ones." I turned to the revolving doors. Freedom was 20 feet away. I took 1 step. Ding. The sound of the elevator arrival was soft, polite, and utterly terrifying. The entire lobby went silent. The chatter of guests, the clinking of glasses in the bar, the ambient jazz music. It all died instantly. I froze. I didn't want to turn around. I really, really didn't. But the silence demanded it. I turned slowly. Otis stood by the elevators. He wasn't naked anymore. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that had clearly been tailored by the gods of fashion themselves. The jacket strained ever so slightly across his shoulders. The pants were cut to perfection. He looked civilized, controlled. Except for his eyes. They were still burning with that molten, predatory gold, and they were fixed on me. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He just started walking across the lobby floor. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Wolves bowed their heads as he passed, exposing their necks. It was a wave of submission that rippled through the room, highlighting just how insane I was for standing upright. He stopped 3 feet from me. He smelled of soap now and that damn cedar. He looked calm, but I could see the pulse jumping in his jaw. "You forgot your suitcase," he said, his voice deceptively mild, carrying through the silent lobby. "Keep it," I said, crossing my arms to hide the fact that my hands were shaking. "It's a donation." "Zola," he warned, stepping closer. The air pressure around us dropped. "Go back upstairs. We need to discuss what happened." "Nothing happened," I lied loudly for the benefit of the 50 people watching. "I walked into the wrong room. I saw some aggressive plumbing. I left." "Aggressive plumbing," he repeated, a corner of his mouth twitching. "Is that what we're calling it?" "I'm leaving, Otis." The use of his first name, without a title, sent a gasp through the room. He moved then, fast as a viper, stepping directly into my path. He didn't grab me. He just occupied the space I intended to walk through. He was a wall of muscle and authority. "You can't leave," he said softly, for my ears only. "You felt it. I know you did." "I felt a draft," I countered, looking up at him. "Now move, or I'll make a scene." "Make a scene," he challenged, his voice low and silky. "I own the hotel. I own the press. I own this city." "You don't own me." The words hung between us. It was the first time in his life anyone had ever said that to him. I saw the shock register followed immediately by a dangerous kind of delight. He took a step back, gesturing to the velvet armchair in the center of the waiting area. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and sat down, crossing one ankle over his knee, looking like a king on a throne, even in a hotel lobby. "Fine," he said, his voice projecting clearly to the terrifyingly silent audience. "If you won't come upstairs to the privacy of my suite, I will wait, right here." I stared at him. "You're bluffing." "I'm an alpha," he said, holding my gaze with a heat that threatened to melt my resolve right there on the carpet. "I don't bluff. I hunt. And right now, I'm hunting you. I'll sleep in this lobby if I have to, Zola. I wonder how the tabloids will interpret the king sleeping in a chair because a woman wouldn't let him explain himself." He folded his hands in his lap and smiled. It was a wicked, devastating smile. "Your move, darling." Chapter 4. Dinner and Dominance. I looked around the lobby. Dozens of phones were already out recording. The headline was writing itself. "Alpha King abandoned by mystery woman. Forced to camp by potted plant." I let out a breath that was 90% frustration and 10% reluctant admiration. He played dirty. I respected that. "One dinner," I hissed, stepping closer so the cameras wouldn't catch the negotiation. "We eat, we talk, then I go to a Motel 6 where no one knows my name." Otis stood up, buttoning his jacket with a smooth, fluid motion that made 3 women near the concierge desk audibly sigh. "The hotel restaurant, private table, and I promise the only thing on the menu will be food." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from the most powerful werewolf in existence, dissecting a bread roll like it was a biology experiment. The restaurant was cleared, naturally. Just us, a terrified waiter named Steve, and enough sexual tension to power the city grid. "You're not eating?" Otis noted, swirling his wine. He looked too good in the candlelight. It was annoying. "I don't eat with the enemy," I replied, buttering a crust with aggressive precision. "It creates a conflict of interest." "Is that what I am?" He leaned forward, his elbows on the white tablecloth. "The enemy?" "You're an alpha king who thinks he can command me to kneel in a bathroom," I pointed out. "In my corporate HR handbook, that classifies you as a hostile work environment." Otis chuckled. It was a low, rusty sound, like he hadn't used it in years. I apologized for the command. It was instinct. "You surprised me." "I surprised you? You were the one doing a majestic impression of a naked statue." "And you." He lowered his voice, his eyes darkening. Didn't look away. Heat flushed up my neck, betraying me. I was assessing the threat level. "Is that what you call it?" He smirked. "Because I've been assessed by generals, assassins, and diplomats. None of them looked at me the way you did." I opened my mouth to retort, but Steve the waiter arrived with the check, trembling. He placed the black folder on the table between us, closer to Otis. Otis reached for it. Of course he did. He was the king. He probably owned the restaurant. He probably owned the cow that provided the steak. My hand slapped down on top of the folder before he could touch it. Otis froze. He looked at my hand, then up at my face. "Zola, what are you doing?" "I'm paying," I said calmly, sliding the folder toward me. "You most certainly are not." His voice dropped an octave. "I am the king. I do not let my dates pay." "It's not a date. It's a hostage negotiation with appetizers. And I pay my own way, always." I whipped out my black Amex, the one I'd worked 80-hour weeks to qualify for, and slapped it on the leather. Put it on this, Steve, and add a 30% tip for the trauma of having to serve us. Steve grabbed the card and bolted before Otis could vaporize him. Otis sat back, stunned. He looked like I'd just spoken in tongues. You're infuriating. I'm independent, I corrected. There's a difference. You're used to wolves who want your power, Otis. I have my own. He stared at me, the silence stretching. Then, he leaned across the table, his face inches from mine. The scent of cedar engulfed me, making my head spin. You think this is about power? He whispered, his gaze dropping to my lips. I don't want your power, Zola. I want to know if you taste as sharp as you speak. I want to know if you make that noise, that little gasp you just made, when I decide to stop asking and start taking. Chapter 5. The Indecent Proposal. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was silent, but it was the kind of silence you find inside a bomb casing right before detonation. I shouldn't have gone up with him. I should have taken my receipt from Steve and bolted. But after that comment at the table, the one that had effectively short-circuited my brain, Otis had suggested a treaty. A conversation in neutral territory to discuss how we move forward without causing a scandal. We stood on opposite sides of the elevator car. I was staring at the floor numbers ticking up. He was staring at me. I could feel his gaze like a physical touch, tracing the line of my throat. 1 week, he said suddenly. I glanced at him. Excuse me? Give me 1 week, he said, turning to face me completely. Stay here. Not as a prisoner, not as a subject. Just you and me. No titles, no press, no commands. And why would I do that? I crossed my arms, protecting my chest from the ache that was starting to bloom there. My wolf was practically wagging her tail. Traitor. Because if you walk away now, you'll always wonder, he said simply. You feel the pull, Zola. Don't lie to me. Every cell in your body is leaning toward mine right now. He was right. It was magnetic. Gravity had shifted. The center of the earth was standing in a charcoal suit 3 feet away. 1 week, I said slowly, weighing the risk. On my terms. Name them. I'm not a guest. I'm an equal. We do things my way. I pick the schedule. I pick the venues. If you try to alpha me, if you try to order me around, I leave. And I take the towels. His lips quirked. You really like those towels. They have a high thread count. Do we have a deal? I held out my hand. Otis looked at my hand, then at my eyes. He reached out. The moment our skin touched, it happened. A shockwave of pure, raw energy blasted through us. It wasn't just static. It was a biological imperative slamming into place. The lights in the elevator flickered, buzzed, and then died completely, plunging us into pitch darkness. The emergency brakes engaged with a lurch that threw me forward. I didn't hit the wall. I hit him. Otis caught me, his arms wrapping around my waist like iron bands. The heat of him was overwhelming. In the dark, the scent was stronger, wilder. Otis, I breathed, my hands finding the lapels of his jacket to steady myself. Deal. He growled against my hair. He didn't let go. Instead, he walked me backward until my spine hit the mirrored wall of the elevator car, his body pressed against mine, hard and unyielding. 1 week starts now, he whispered. And Zola, I plan to win. Chapter 6. Alpha in the Wild. You are wearing a 3-piece Italian suit to a boardwalk carnival, I said, eyeing Otis as we stood under the neon sign of Luigi's Funland. You look like you're here to foreclose on the bumper cars. Otis adjusted his cufflinks, looking at the chaotic swirl of tourists, cotton candy stalls, and screaming children with deep suspicion. You said, pick the venue. I assumed we were going to a bistro or an opera. The opera doesn't have deep-fried Oreos. Come on, Your Majesty, loosen the tie. I grabbed his hand, ignoring the spark that zipped up my arm, and dragged him into the fray. The goal was to see if the Alpha King could function as a human being. The results were mixed. He tried to tip the ticket booth guy $100. He growled at a teenager who bumped into me near the tilt-a-whirl. But when I handed him a corn dog, he looked at it with such perplexed fascination that I actually laughed out loud. "It's meat on a stick, Otis. It's not a cryptic ancient rune, just bite it." He took a bite, looking dignified even with yellow mustard on his lip. "Acceptable," he conceded. We were standing near the ring toss, and for a moment it was nice, normal. He wasn't the king. He was just a guy with mustard on his face who smelled really good. Then, the vibe shifted. "Well, hello there, gorgeous." A wolf, a rogue by the smell of him, smelling of cheap beer and bad decisions, slid up next to me. He ignored Otis completely, his eyes raking over my dress. "You look like you need a man who knows how to handle a real ride." Beside me, the air temperature dropped 20 degrees. I felt Otis before I saw him. A low rumble started deep in his chest, a vibration that warned of violence. His claws were actually lengthening, tipping the ends of his manicured fingers. His eyes were flashing gold. He was seconds away from shifting and tearing this guy apart in front of 300 families. "Otis!" I hissed. "Stand down." "He insulted you," Otis snarled, stepping forward, his voice dripping with lethal intent. "I will remove his tongue. And create a PR nightmare that I have to clean up? Absolutely not." I stepped in front of Otis, placing a hand on his chest to push him back. It was like pushing a brick wall, and turned to the drunk Romeo. I didn't growl. I didn't threaten. I smiled, the sharp predatory smile I used in boardroom negotiations when I was about to gut a competitor. "Listen, buddy," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm currently on a date with a man who could buy this entire pier and turn it into a parking lot just to spite you. Also, your fly is down, and you have corn dog batter in your beard. It's not a good look." The crowd around us snickered. The guy turned bright red, looked down at his zipper and mumbled something incoherent before shuffling away into the darkness. I turned back to Otis. He wasn't angry anymore. The gold had receded, replaced by a look of utter shock. "You handled him," he said, sounding bewildered. "I'm from the city, Otis. I deal with pests every day. I don't need you to murder people for me." He stared at me, the carnival lights reflecting in his dark eyes. He looked at my hand, which was still resting on his chest, right over his heart. "I usually have to protect my partners," he said quietly, covering my hand with his. "I've never had a partner who protected me." "Don't get used to it," I quipped, trying to pull my hand away. He didn't let go. He pulled me closer, right there in the middle of the parking lot, pinning me against the side of his black SUV. The playfulness was gone. "I like it," he murmured, dipping his head until his lips brushed my jawline. "I like it when you bite." Chapter 7. The Spa Day. The drive back to the hotel was quiet, but it wasn't the awkward silence of strangers. It was the heavy, thrumming silence of a downed power line. Otis kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting on the center console, inches from my knee. The air in the SUV felt thick enough to chew. "You're tense," I noted, watching his knuckles whiten as we navigated the late-night city traffic. "I'm restraining myself," he replied, his voice a low gravel. "There is a difference." When we reached the hotel, he didn't lead me to the elevator. He led me to the service entrance of the Grand Lunar Spa. "It's closed," I pointed out as he swiped a black key card. "Not for me," he said. The doors slid open to reveal a subterranean grotto that looked like it had been stolen from a Grecian myth. Dark blue water, artificial waterfalls, and steam rising into the dimly lit air. It was beautiful. It was private. And it was incredibly humid. "A swim," Otis announced, discarding his jacket on a lounge chair. "To burn off the energy." I kicked off my heels. "You think you can outswim me? I was captain of the varsity team. You just sit on a throne and look menacing." Otis smirked, loosening his tie. Care to make a wager? If I win, I said, stepping out of my dress and thanking the universe I was wearing matching lingerie. You owe me a foot rub, and not a lazy one. I want deep tissue. And if I win? He unbuttoned his shirt, revealing that the abs I'd seen in the shower hadn't been a hallucination. You won't. I dove in. The water was warm, silky against my skin. We raced laps, the water churning around us. I swam like I was escaping a predator, pushing my muscles to the limit. I touched the wall on the final lap, gasping for air, victory surging through me. I turned around to gloat, only to find Otis leaning against the wall right next to me, barely winded. Tie, he lied. I knew he'd held back. I could feel the sheer power radiating off him in the water. You let me win, I accused, splashing water at him. I prefer the view from behind, he countered, his eyes dark. We drifted to the shallow end where the jets bubbled furiously. The playfulness vanished as the water settled. Otis leaned his head back against the tile rim, closing his eyes. He looked exhausted. Not physically, he was a machine, but spiritually. The weight of leading the entire wolf population seemed to etch lines around his eyes. Without thinking, I moved closer. I reached out, my hands finding the cords of tension in his shoulders. He flinched, his eyes snapping open. Relax, I commanded softly. You carry the world all day. Put it down for 5 minutes. I dug my thumbs into the knots at the base of his neck. He groaned, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief that vibrated through the water and straight into my chest. I worked his muscles, feeling the iron-hard tension slowly give way. It was intimate, more intimate somehow than if we'd been kissing. I was taking care of him, and he was letting me. My hands slid down his chest, tracing the scars. The water lapped around us, the only sound the hum of the filters. Zola, he warned, his voice strained. Shh. I moved closer, my legs tangling with his underwater. The friction was electric. I've got you. Otis's breath hitched. Suddenly, his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was bruising, his control snapping like a dry twig. Stop, he rasped, his eyes flashing a brilliant, blinding gold. Claws lengthened, scratching against the tile. He shoved away from me, backing into the deeper water, looking at me like I was a grenade he'd just unpinned. Be careful, Zola. If you keep touching me like that, I won't be able to stop what happens next. Chapter 8. The King's Burden. Otis left the pool like he was evacuating a burning building. By the time I made it back to the suite, wrapped in a plush robe that cost more than my first car, he was standing on the balcony, staring out at the city skyline. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, his knuckles white against the glass. The wind whipped his damp hair, making him look wild and untamed. I slid the glass door open. You ran away. I retreated, he corrected, not turning around. There is a strategic difference. You were scared. I walked up beside him, leaning my elbows on the railing. The city lights twinkled below us, a million lives oblivious to the drama on the penthouse balcony. Otis turned to look at me. The gold had faded from his eyes, leaving them a deep, soulful hazel. I have spent my entire life being the strongest thing in the room, Zola. I am the alpha of alphas. I don't get scared. He took a sip of his drink. But you make me want things I cannot afford. Like what? Like peace, he whispered. Like the ability to lose control without the world falling apart. My heart gave a painful squeeze. I saw it then. The cage he lived in. Everyone saw the crown. No one saw the bars. He was surrounded by wolves who either wanted to usurp him or submit to him. He had no peers. He was utterly alone. I'm not asking you to be the king right now, I said softly. I took the glass from his hand and set it on the railing. I'm just asking you to be Otis. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign of deception. And what do you get out of that deal? I am a burden, Zola. My life is duty and violence and politics. Why would an independent woman like you want any part of it? Maybe I like a challenge, I shrugged, trying to keep it light, though my pulse was racing. Or maybe I just think you need someone who knows how to do the dishes. You have terrible domestic skills. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He reached out, tucking a strand of damp hair behind my ear. His touch was reverent, gentle. I don't need a queen, he murmured. I need this. Someone who sees me. I see you, I promised. And I did. God help me. I did. He didn't kiss me. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in the crook of my neck. He held me like I was the only solid thing in a spinning world. We stood there for a long time, the wind cooling our skin while the heat between us kept us warm. Eventually, we moved inside. There was no discussion of separate rooms. It felt inevitable. We lay down on the massive king-sized bed, on top of the covers, fully robed. It should have been awkward. It should have been sexual. But it was just necessary. Otis wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat. Slow, steady, powerful, against my back. Sleep, Otis, I whispered, covering his hand with mine. For the first time since I'd met him, the tension left his body completely. He exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, and surrendered to the dark. I fell asleep moments later, thinking that this quiet, heavy trust was far more dangerous than any physical act. I could guard my body. I wasn't sure I could guard my heart against the feeling of the Alpha King sleeping peacefully in my arms. Chapter 9. Breaking the Dam. I woke up to sunlight and the sensation of being pinned. Otis was draped over me, a heavy, warm blanket of muscle. His face was buried in the pillow next to mine, one arm thrown possessively across my waist, his leg tangled between mine. The no-conflict rule of our truce had apparently dissolved in the night, replaced by a no-personal space policy. I shifted, trying to stretch. Otis grumbled something unintelligible and tightened his grip, pulling me flush against him. The friction of our bodies, morning warm and soft, sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. I froze. He froze. He wasn't asleep anymore. Otis lifted his head, his hair messy, his eyes heavy with sleep and heat. He looked at me, and the air in the room evaporated. There were no walls left, no one-week deals, no playful banter to hide behind. "Good morning," I whispered, my voice raspy. "Is it?" He moved, hovering over me, supporting his weight on his elbows. He looked at my mouth like a starving man looks at a feast. "That depends on what happens in the next 10 seconds. He lowered his head and kissed me. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was enclaiming. It was fire and earth and desperation. His lips were firm, demanding, tasting of mint and sovereignty. My hands found their way into his hair, gripping the dark strands, pulling him closer. My wolf purred so loud it vibrated in my chest, a triumphant, "Finally." The kiss deepened, turning frantic. Otis groaned, a low rumble that I felt in my own throat. He shifted, his weight settling between my legs, and the feeling of him, solid and real, broke the last of my resistance. But even in the haze of lust, the old Zola, the one who needed control, flared up. I didn't want to be overwhelmed. I wanted to participate. I put my hands on his chest and pushed. It was like pushing a boulder, but he yielded, pulling back just an inch, his eyes black with desire. "Wait," I breathed. "I can't wait," he growled, diving for my neck. "Otis, stay." The command froze him. Not because I used an alpha voice, I didn't have one, but because he wanted to listen. He stopped, hovering inches from my skin, his breath hot against my pulse point. He looked up, waiting. "I set the pace," I said, my heart hammering. Remember? A slow, wicked grin spread across his face. Then lead the way, Zola. I pulled him back down. The next hour was a blur of sensation. It was a battle where everyone won. It was fierce and tender and consuming. There was no hierarchy here, just a man and a woman unraveling each other. As the sunlight streamed across the tangled sheets, I arched my back, crying out his name. At that exact moment, a searing, burning heat flared on the side of my neck. It wasn't just passion, it was pain. Sharp, branding pain. Otis roared, his head thrown back, his hand clutching his own neck. We collapsed together, panting, slick with sweat. The room spun. Slowly, the burning faded to a dull, throbbing ache. I reached up, my fingers brushing the sensitive skin below my ear. It felt tender, raised. I scrambled out of bed, stumbling toward the vanity mirror across the room. My legs were shaking. "Zola?" Otis called out, his voice laced with a strange mixture of awe and panic. I gripped the edge of the dresser and stared at my reflection. There, on the side of my neck, glowing with a faint iridescent silver light, was a mark. An intricate swirling design of a wolf and a crown. It wasn't just a hickey. It wasn't a bite. It was a mating mark, the legendary physical manifestation of a bond so strong the universe decides to tattoo it on you. "Oh no," I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "Oh God, no." Otis appeared in the mirror behind me. He had a matching mark on his neck, glowing gold. He looked at it, then at mine, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's done," he breathed, reaching for me. "The bond, it's absolute." I backed away, hitting the wall. The glow looked like a shackle. It looked like the end of Zola, the VP of marketing, and the beginning of Zola, the king's property. "This wasn't part of the deal," I stammered, covering the mark with my hand. "We said 1 week. We said no titles." "The bond doesn't care about deals," Otis said, stepping closer. "You are mine, Zola, and I am yours. There is no going back." Chapter 10. The morning after panic. There is no going back. Otis's words hung in the air, heavier than the humidity in the room. He stepped toward me, his hand reaching out to graze the glowing silver mark on my neck. The touch should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like the click of a padlock. I flinched. It was a small movement, a twitch of instinct, but it froze Otis in his tracks. His hand hovered in midair, inches from my skin, before slowly dropping to his side. The wonder in his eyes curdled into confusion, and then, heartbreakingly, into hurt. "Zola?" I scrambled backward, putting the velvet armchair between us like a barricade. "I need my pants. Where are my pants?" "Zola, stop." "I can't stop. I have a fluorescent tattoo on my neck, Otis. I have a board meeting at 9. How am I supposed to explain this?" "Sorry I'm late. I accidentally soul-bonded with the monarchy while you were going over Q3 projections." I found my blouse crumpled on the floor and pulled it on with shaking hands. I was hyperventilating. The mark pulsed with every beat of my heart, a constant rhythmic reminder that my autonomy, the thing I had fought for, bled for, sacrificed relationships for, was gone. I wasn't Zola the VP anymore. I was the king's mate. I was a consort, a broodmare in a tiara. "It is not a cage," Otis said, his voice low and eerily calm. He hadn't moved. He was watching me unravel with a terrifying stillness. "It is a connection. You feel it. Don't lie to me." "I feel like I'm suffocating." I snapped, buttoning my shirt wrong. I ripped it open and started again. "I told you, Otis. I said I wasn't ready to be queen. I said I wanted 1 week. You broke the deal." "I didn't cast a spell," he roared, his control finally fraying. "This is biology. It's fate. I didn't ask for this any more than you did, but I'm not running from it like a coward." The word coward hit me like a slap. I stopped buttoning. I looked up at him, my eyes burning. "I am not a coward. I am a realist. You live in a palace. I live in a studio apartment that smells like takeout and freedom. You have subjects. I have clients. You want me to just erase myself? To merge into you until there's nothing left of me but the king's wife? Is that what you think I want? Otis looked shattered. The mighty Alpha King looked like a man watching his house burn down. I don't want a subject, Zola. I have millions of them. They bore me to death. I wanted you, because you're the only person who doesn't look at me and see a title. But that's all anyone else will see, I whispered, grabbing my blazer. And eventually, that's all I'll see too. I grabbed my purse. My wolf was howling in my head, scratching at the back of my skull, screaming at me to stay, to submit, to comfort him. I shoved her down into the mental basement and locked the door. I walked to the door. Zola. I stopped, my hand on the brass knob. I didn't turn around. I'm not asking you to give up your life, Otis said. His voice was cold now. Dead. The king was back. I'm asking you to share mine. If you can't tell the difference, then you're right. You're not ready. I heard the distinct sound of him turning his back on me. Leave. Chapter 11. The Separation. My apartment felt small. It had never felt small before. It had felt cozy, efficient, mine. Now it felt like a shoebox. I sat on my beige sofa, staring at the blank TV screen. It had been 12 hours since I walked out of the Grand Lunar Hotel. 12 hours of absolute misery. I had tried to go to work. That was a disaster. I'd walked into the office wearing a silk scarf to hide the mark, which only made me look like I was auditioning for a French noir film. I snapped at my assistant for bringing me coffee with the wrong milk. I stared at a spreadsheet for 3 hours and realized I was just typing Otis into the cells over and over again in white font. I left at noon, citing a migraine. The migraine was actually a heartache so profound, it felt like a physical bruising of my ribs. My wolf was giving me the silent treatment. She was curled up in the corner of my mind, depressed, refusing to acknowledge me. I was alone. Truly, properly alone for the first time in my life. I thought this was what I wanted. I thought I wanted my space. So why did the silence in my apartment sound so loud? Stupid, I muttered, grabbing the remote. You're a strong, independent woman. You don't need a man who leaves wet towels on the floor. I turned on the TV, desperate for noise. Breaking news. The banner flashed red across the bottom of the screen. King Otis addresses the lunar summit amidst rumors of a mystery companion. My breath hitched. The camera cut to a podium. Otis stood there. He looked terrible. Well, terrible for Otis was still better than 99% of the population on their best day. But I knew him now. I saw the tightness around his eyes. I saw the way his shoulders were set in a defensive line, carrying the weight of the world without anyone to rub the knots out. He looked hollowed out. A reporter shouted a question. Your Majesty, reports say a woman was seen fleeing your suite this morning. Is the crown in crisis? Otis leaned into the microphone. He didn't growl. He didn't evade. The crown is fine, he said, his voice raspy. He looked directly into the camera lens. It felt like he was looking right through the screen, into my beige living room. But the king is looking for a partner, someone who knows that strength isn't about standing alone. It's about standing together without losing your footing. He raised a hand to adjust his tie. As he did, the cuff of his shirt slipped down. There, on the inside of his wrist, a secondary placement for the mark, I saw the silver glow. He wasn't hiding it. He was wearing it on national television. He wasn't ashamed of me. He was waiting for me. The realization hit me harder than the shower steam. I hadn't run away because I was fierce. I ran away because I was scared. I was scared that I wasn't enough to hold my own beside him. I was scared that I would disappear. But Otis didn't want me to disappear. He wanted me to be the anchor. Oh, for the love of... I stood up, tossing the remote onto the couch. I am an idiot. My wolf perked up. Agreed, she huffed. I looked around my empty apartment. It was safe, it was controlled, and it was boring as hell. I grabbed my keys. Screw the protocol. Chapter 12. The Return. I didn't take a cab. I drove like a maniac. I pulled up to the valet stand of the Grand Lunar Hotel, tires screeching. The same valet who had parked Otis's SUV 2 nights ago looked at my beat-up sedan with disdain. "We are full, ma'am," he sneered, "and the king is in residence, so security is—" I didn't have time for this. I stepped out of the car, slammed the door, and ripped the silk scarf off my neck. The mark was blazing. In the evening light, the silver and gold swirl seemed to hum with energy. The valet's eyes bugged out of his head. He choked on his own spit. He practically threw himself onto the pavement in a bow. My apologies. I didn't see. "Keep the car running," I said, tossing him the keys. "I won't be long. Or maybe I will. I haven't decided yet." I marched through the lobby. Security guards stepped forward to intercept me near the elevators. I didn't slow down. I just tapped the mark on my neck. They parted like the Red Sea, faces pale. It was the ultimate VIP pass. I didn't just have clearance, I was the clearance. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow. I spent the time checking my reflection in the mirrored walls. My hair was windblown, my makeup was smudged, and I looked manic. Good. Fierce wasn't about being polished. It was about showing up. The elevator dinged at the penthouse. The door to the suite was unlocked. I pushed it open. The room was dark, lit only by the city lights filtering in through the glass doors. It smelled of him, cedar and rain, and the ache in my chest finally began to ease. He wasn't inside. I walked to the balcony doors. They were open. Otis was standing at the railing, exactly where I had left him in my memory. He was staring out at the moon, a solitary figure against the vast, indifferent sky. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand, but he wasn't drinking it. He sensed me. I saw his back stiffen, his head tilted slightly, catching my scent on the wind. He didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He was waiting to see if I was a hallucination. "You were wrong," I said, my voice trembling slightly before I firmed it up. Otis slowly turned. He looked at me. Messy hair, blazing mark, defiant stance. A flicker of hope ignited in his tired eyes, fragile and terrifying. "About what?" he asked hoarsely. "You said I was scared to share your life," I said, stepping onto the balcony. The wind whipped my hair across my face. "I'm not scared of sharing your life, Otis. I'm scared of losing mine." "Zola, I told you." "Let me finish," I interrupted, walking until I was arm's length from him. "I don't want to be a queen who waves from a balcony. I have a job, I have a career, I have opinions that will annoy your advisors. I leave the cap off the toothpaste." "I can buy new toothpaste," he whispered, setting his glass down on the railing. "I'm serious," I said, poking him in the chest. "If I do this, if I stay, it's not as a subject. It's not even as a wife. It's as a partner. If you sit on the throne, I get a chair right next to it. A comfortable one, with lumbar support." Otis looked down at my finger poking his chest. Then he looked up at my eyes. The corner of his mouth twitched. The darkness in his gaze began to recede, replaced by that golden warmth I had started to crave. "Is that a negotiation?" he asked softly. "It's a takeover," I corrected. "I'm acquiring you, but the terms are non-negotiable." He reached out, his hand wrapping around the finger I was using to poke him. He pulled me in, inch by inch, until our bodies collided. "On what terms?" he murmured, his lips brushing mine. I smiled, fierce and free. "Mine." Chapter 13. The Bearing of the Throat. "Mine," Otis echoed, the words sounding like a prayer against my lips. He didn't argue. He didn't try to negotiate the finer points of my hostile takeover. Instead, he swept me up into his arms, bridal style, which usually would have earned him a swift kick to the shin, but tonight felt strangely appropriate, and carried me back inside the suite. He kicked the balcony door shut behind us, sealing out the city, the wind, and the world. He didn't take me to the bed. He set me down in the center of the living room rug, standing back to look at me. The air between us was vibrating, thick with the uncompleted bond. My skin felt too tight for my body. The mark on my neck was pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "If we do this," Otis said, his voice rough, "there is no 1 week. There is no maybe. This is absolute, Zola. It binds our souls. If I die, you wither. If you die, I follow." "I know the lore, Otis," I whispered, stepping closer. "I'm not looking for an exit strategy anymore." Otis let out a breath that seemed to rattle his ribs. Then he did something that stopped my heart cold. The Alpha King, the ruler of the lunar courts, the man who made prime ministers tremble, slowly lowered himself to one knee. He didn't pull me down with him. He stayed there, looking up at me with eyes of molten gold. He reached for my hands, placing them on his shoulders. Then, slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head back. He bared his throat to me. It was the ultimate sign of submission. In wolf culture, you only exposed your jugular to someone you trusted with your life, or someone you acknowledged as your conqueror. "I have spent centuries commanding others," he rasped, his Adam's apple bobbing against the vulnerable stretch of skin. "I have never bowed, not once." His gaze locked onto mine, fierce and yielding all at once. "But I bow to you. Not because you are my mate, but because you are my match. Claim me, Zola. Rule me." Tears pricked my eyes. This wasn't just romance. This was a transfer of power. He wasn't asking for a queen to sit prettily beside him. He was handing me the keys to the kingdom and asking me to drive. My wolf surged forward, ancient and triumphant. She didn't want to hurt him. She wanted to secure him. I leaned down, my fingers tangling in the dark hair at the nape of his neck. I traced the pulsing vein in his throat with my thumb. "You're an idiot if you think I'm ever letting you up from this floor," I whispered shakily. "Do it," he groaned. I didn't hesitate. I let instinct take the wheel. I leaned in and sank my teeth into the junction of his neck and shoulder, right over the glowing gold mark. It wasn't painful. It was electric. The moment my teeth broke the skin, a shockwave of pure energy blasted outward from us. It felt like being struck by lightning and surviving. I saw his memories. The loneliness, the burden, the cold throne, and I flooded them with my own. The stubbornness, the fire, the need to be seen. The bond snapped into place with a sound like a cracking whip. The force of it was physical. The air pressure in the room spiked instantly. Crash. The floor-to-ceiling glass doors leading to the balcony exploded outward. Shards of safety glass rained down like diamonds, tinkling as they hit the marble terrace. I pulled back, gasping, tasting his power on my tongue. Otis looked at me, his eyes wild, his chest heaving. We were surrounded by wreckage, wind whipping through the shattered opening, blowing the curtains into a frenzy. We looked at the destruction. Then we looked at each other. Otis started to laugh. It was a deep, joyous sound, free of burden. "Well," he panted, pulling me down into his lap amidst the sea of glass. "I suppose that's one way to announce our engagement." Chapter 14. The Public Debut. The next morning, the suite looked like a rock star had partied with a hurricane. The balcony doors were gone. The curtains were shredded. There was a faint scorch mark on the Persian rug where the energy discharge had grounded itself, and I had never slept better in my life. I woke up wrapped in Otis, the bond humming contentedly in the back of my mind. It wasn't a cage anymore. It was a dedicated Wi-Fi connection to the person I loved. I could feel his amusement before he even opened his eyes. "We broke the hotel," I mumbled into his chest. "I own the hotel," he rumbled, tightening his arm around me. "I'll deduct it from my security deposit." A low, rhythmic thumping sound from outside interrupted our morning peace. I lifted my head. "Is that a helicopter?" Otis sighed. the sound of a man who knew his vacation was over. The glass explosion was loud. I imagine the press has questions about whether the king has been assassinated or if he's just having a very good time. I sat up, dragging the sheet with me. They think you're dead? Or under attack. He sat up, raking a hand through his hair. I need to address them. He moved to get out of bed, the alpha mask sliding back into place. He was reaching for his trousers, ready to go out there and be the stoic, solitary protector again. "Hey," I said sharp. He paused, looking back at me. I corrected. "We need to address them." Otis hesitated. "Zola, it's a feeding frenzy down there. They will tear you apart. They'll look for weakness. Good thing I don't have any." I threw off the sheet and grabbed his white dress shirt from the floor. It hung to my mid-thigh, looking ridiculous and fantastic. I didn't button it all the way up. The silver mark on my neck was on full display, glowing softly in the morning light. "Let's go." We walked out onto the balcony, or what was left of it. The noise hit us instantly. A roar of voices, camera shutters, and the thwup-thwup of a news chopper hovering a safe distance away. Below, the street was packed. It looked like the entire lunar summit had emptied onto the pavement. When Otis stepped into view, the crowd went silent. Then, they saw me. I stood next to him, barefoot, wearing nothing but his shirt and a look of absolute boredom. The silence stretched, heavy and judgmental. They were assessing me. The mystery woman. The human-sized complication. Otis moved to step in front of me, his arm coming up to shield me from the cameras. It was instinct. He wanted to block the view. I caught his wrist. Gently but firmly, I lowered his arm. I stepped forward, right up to the edge of the jagged, broken doorframe. I looked down at the sea of faces, at the telephoto lenses pointed at my unbrushed hair. "Good morning," I called out, my voice projecting clearly over the wind. "Sorry about the noise last night. We had a structural disagreement." A brave reporter near the front shouted up, holding a microphone like a weapon. "Who are you? Are you the king's new consort? Are you ready to serve the crown?" Otis stiffened beside me. I could feel his anger spiking through the bond. He was about to roar. I squeezed his hand to silence him. I leaned over the railing, smiling that sharp, predatory smile that had won me 3 promotions in 5 years. "I'm Zola," I announced, "and I don't serve the crown. I handle the logistics." I pointed a thumb at Otis, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and adoration. "He runs the world. I run him. Any other questions?" The crowd erupted. Laughter, cheers, and the frantic clicking of cameras. I had given them a soundbite, a narrative, and a show. I turned back to Otis. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at me like I was the sun, and he was a planet that had finally found its orbit. He leaned down, ignoring the millions of people watching, and brushed his lips against the shell of my ear. "God," he whispered, his voice thick with desire. "I love it when you're bossy." Chapter 15. Room service. The glass doors to the balcony had been replaced with reinforced, shatter-resistant polymer. I checked the invoice myself to be sure. After all, when you're married to the Alpha King, insurance premiums tend to skyrocket. It had been exactly 365 days since I broke into this suite. A lot had changed. I had a new office in the palace, which I had redecorated because the previous aesthetic was ancient gloom, a new last name, though I kept my own bank accounts, and a permanent shimmering mark on my neck that acted as a do not disturb sign to the entire male population. But some things hadn't changed. The Grand Lunar Hotel still had excellent water pressure. I stood under the spray of the master bath shower, letting the hot water pound against my back. The steam was thick, curling around the glass walls, turning the room into a white, misty void. It was déjà vu in the best possible way. I closed my eyes, tilting my head back. I felt him before I heard him. The bond in my mind hummed, a warm, golden vibration that announced his presence like a trumpet blast. He was tired. He'd spent the day arguing with the Northern Council about territory lines. He was annoyed. And he was hungry. But the moment he stepped into the suite, all of that vanished, replaced by a spike of pure, unadulterated want. The bathroom door clicked open. I didn't cover up. I didn't reach for a towel. I didn't scramble for a witty excuse. I just turned slowly, water sluicing down my body, and looked through the glass. Otis stood in the doorway. He looked exactly as he had that first night, only in reverse. He was fully dressed in a tuxedo, having just come from the anniversary gala downstairs. His tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck. His hair was slightly disheveled. He froze. His eyes, already shifting to that deep, molten gold, swept over me. He took in the steam, the glass, the water, and the very naked wife standing in the center of it all. A slow, wicked smirk spread across his face. He leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked devastatingly handsome and utterly arrogant. "Room service?" he drawled, his voice dropping to that low, vibrating register that still made my knees weak. I laughed, shaking my wet hair out of my face. I walked to the glass door and pushed it open. Steam billowed out, wrapping around his tuxedo legs. "I don't know," I mused, stepping out of the shower and dripping water onto the expensive tile, right where he had stood a year ago. I walked up to him, placing my wet hands flat against the crisp white of his dress shirt. I ordered the special, high heat, extra spice, and a very dominant flavor profile. "Do you think you can deliver?" Otis didn't answer with words. He growled, a low sound of possession, and kicked the bathroom door shut behind him. "I suppose," he whispered, grabbing my waist and pulling me flush against his tailored suit, not caring that I was soaking him to the bone. "I can make an exception for a VIP client." He kissed me, and for the second time in this bathroom, the world ceased to exist. There were no kings, no queens, no politics, just steam, heat, and the best mistake I ever made.